Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guest during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location, and your message, and we'll try to pick up at any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at standard rate, so why not get ready to text? Tonight's show marks something of a milestone here at Edge Media, Controversial TV. It will be my 74th show since I started presenting it on October the 2nd, 2008. But sadly, and much more importantly, it will also be the last ever live show broadcast on this channel. Unless, that is, those who are working hard to save it really can. In any event, it should be running repeats of existing catalogue until the end of June, and then watch this space or check out edgemediatv.com. Having given you that sad news, I'm delighted that tonight we are going out on a major high. I'll be talking with a man who has for 20 years now bared his soul and everything else in his search for who he truly is and what his place is in our, or as, the infinite consciousness. On his journey, he has also discovered that our world and the humans in it, namely you and me, are in the very greatest danger, a danger which is now apparently coming to its final apocalyptic stages at the end of thousands of years of planning and deception. A danger so terrible that many recoil even from hearing about it, or close their minds to it, or even accuse my guest of being totally insane so that they do not have to consider the awful possibility that perhaps what he says in his many books is true, as though that could stop him. He has just sold out the first of 2 8-hour shows at Brixton Academy, and his new book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More, has just been released. And what a read it is. If you haven't guessed yet who my guest is tonight, here's the fearless, the insightful, the visionary, the extraordinary spirit of the age, David Icke. What a show we've got tonight! David,
I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, Theo.
Was that a bit of a build-up?
Oh, it was, yeah. It's because the you know, showing more than you know, kind of you said, was on the front of that book, I Am Me, I Am Free.
Yes.
And when I was naked on the front, and as someone said, it was much ado about nothing, you know. But yeah, I mean, we've got these full body scanners now, you know,
at the airport,
showing
yes.
people naked at the airport, and I said at Brixton, they want to see my body, serves them right, mate. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. So that's great that it's got to 20 years, and it's going to get to a lot more. You
describe the journey in this book. I mean, it's an incredibly dense read. It's nearly 700 pages altogether, isn't it? I have actually read every word, and a lot of it is where you got to where you are now, which is in itself an incredible journey, and how you've built layer upon layer of learning and knowledge of what's going on experientially and through, you know, research over those 20 years.
Yeah, you know, it was kind of funny when I was writing it 20 years after I consciously started the journey, and I remembered lots of things that I'd forgotten, really. And key to everything that I've done in the last 2 decades, right up to now, was something that I was told in 1990. I went to see a psychic because no other reason than for a year I'd felt like there was a presence in the room when I was in a room alone. I wasn't alone. And this got more and more powerful, more and more tangible, to the point where, long story short, I went to see a psychic. Didn't tell her what was going on. I said I wanted hands-on healing for my arthritis, which was true, but the real reason I went was, will she pick it up? Mm-hmm. And a series of things started happening on the 3rd visit to her. Well, when I am in a point in my life where I'm presenting the sport, and I'm national spokesman for the Green Party.
You're presenting Grandstand, weren't you?
Yeah,
on BBC television.
Yeah, and then I'm lying on this bench, having the hands-on healing, and suddenly she said, my God, this is powerful, I've got to close my eyes for this one. And of course, I'm all new to this at the time, and I'm thinking, you know, what the heck's going on? And then she started giving me these messages from these figures she was seeing in her psyche, that I was going to go out on the world stage and reveal great secrets, and basically everything that was said that day in 1990 has happened or is happening. And the reason I mention that is because there was one specific, quote, message that has really been the foundation of everything I've done. And it was, he will say things and wonder where they came from. They will be our words. And sometimes we will put knowledge into his mind. Sometimes he will be led to knowledge. There was another one later connected to that which said, no need for arduous searching. It was all arranged, in effect, a long time ago. All you need to do is follow the clues. And those few words, Theo, absolutely encompass the way I've lived my life since 1990. The way the sequence goes, and you quite rightly say in the introduction, it's been layered. Because if you're hit with anything like the big picture in one go, I mean, your brain goes, excuse me, can't compute, I'm going to get my turquoise shell suit on. Right? Which is what happened to me. That yes, time 20 years ago, I was hit by so much information. It was like pressing too many keys on the computer, it froze. But what's happened is it's gone in layers. The first few years were about the way that a network of families, interbreeding families, control the banking system, engineer wars, use techniques that I've talked about, like problem, reaction, solution, create the problem, then offer the solution, and the totalitarian tiptoe where you're going from A to Z, but you don't tell people that, but you go in little steps, each one projected as unconnected to all the others.
Like the EU, for instance.
Yeah, so you go down the road to where you're going, and always were going, but the people don't realize that's where you're going because you're taking them there in steps. Bigger steps you can get away with, but not big enough for people to go, hold on a second, what's going on? Because the change is so great. So that was all the whole first few years, and then it started going into this whole reptilian area. Then it went into the nature of reality, by far the most important, because without understanding at least the themes of this reality, what it interact with it, we can't understand the conspiracy, for a simple reason, that the center of this cabal of manipulation, they know how reality works, and they keep it systematically from us by religion and by mainstream science, which is held in what I call a song sheet mindset, where it keeps research, scientific research and awareness in such a narrow band, but it never gets out to see what reality is. And if you know how reality works, and how people interact with it, and how people affect it and are affected by it, and you keep that from the population, you are, although you're a few, in an enormous position of power. And then it's moved on now in this book into the whole thing about the moon that I'm talking about. And the process has gone with each of these layers, each of these stages, in precisely the way that was told to me 20 years ago. What kind of happens is I'll get an insight, like from out of nowhere, that something is how it is. And then from that moment on, increasingly, very, very quickly after that, information comes into my life in terms of documents, books, people I meet, my own experience, all related to that particular subject. And I've started to learn now and understand that when that starts to happen, I'm thinking, okay, there's a whole new area opening up here. And the areas are getting closer and closer together because we are expanding in our ability to process this information, therefore we can receive it in greater abundance quicker than before.
Okay. I think what we need to do is get a couple of issues out of the way at the start of the show.
Issues?
Well, issues...
I have issues.
Well, they're not your issues.
Oh, they're your issues. Well, anybody got a handkerchief?
I had people text me some questions before the show,
right.
And a few people mentioned this accusation that you've given people a Masonic handshake. Now, I think it's important to get it out of the way. And this is someone called Dead People Stuff, who's a member of our forum, and he says, what about those Camelot handshakes? You know, so that people want to know about this. I've seen that fake photograph on your website of you being a Mason in the pinny and everything, and about 4 foot tall.
Don't I wear it well?
But I think it's important to just, you know, get that out of the way if we can at the start here.
Well,
I've got one more.
You say it's important, but when something is total garbage, and so obviously so, I wonder if it is important to get it out of the way. First of all, I couldn't give a damn what people say about me in any way, shape or form.
Okay.
It doesn't go in one ear and out the other. It doesn't touch the sides. I've had 20 years of it. I've been ridiculed by the best mate.
Well, I appreciate
the thing is about some of the things that are said about me, and other researchers too, is it's like they're trying to bring you down for no other, or trying to undermine you for no other reason than to undermine you. And you know, I've seen that I make signs with my Masonic signs with my hands when I'm talking. That's another one from basically the same source. Well, just let me show you this. That is my hand. It's riddled with rheumatoid arthritis, and my fingers are apart like that because they won't, unless I pull them together, and it's not very pleasant, go together. And so, as I said in an interview the other day, this is clearly a massive exposure of me, because what's being exposed here, it's very little known. It's the arthritic hand Masonic handshake. Apparently it goes back to Babylon. Apparently. And the other thing that, I mean, you've got to laugh, haven't you? I mean, you know, I mean, if they had a brain cell, it would die alone in this. But another thing that I do is, you know this thing, Theo, when they say, people have this thing about firm handshake, sign of sincerity, right? Well, they have that thought a few seconds before they're peeling me off the flipping ceiling. Because they come in and they grab your hand. You know, people who know me, they don't. They don't even shake my hand, or they might go, hello. And so what I tend to do, sometimes when someone comes at me with one of them, is I grab their hand.
Yeah.
I grab their hand so they can't squeeze mine. But apart from that, I mean, it's all kind of garbage. But believe it if you wish, because I couldn't care less.
Okay. All right. I'll give you one more like
that.
One more like
issue. Sorry.
This is from somebody called Dallo. I have a question that seems unimportant, but it keeps coming back. Much as I admire David and the work he has done, as someone who's often been ridiculed and dismissed because of his Wogan comment years ago, which I totally understand was edited and received completely out of context, why does he present himself in such an otherworldly, almost messianic way on his DVDs and books? Is it just slightly unfortunate quirk of Neil Haig's art, and not exactly images a wide audience readership can easily relate to?
Well, don't relate to it then. That's it. Don't relate to it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You know, I tell you what, this is an important point. You know, we disappear up our backsides, human beings, so profoundly. We are so obsessed with the twigs, never mind the trees. We're so obsessed with the twigs, we can't see the forest. Therefore, in other words, we were so obsessed with the bits, we can't see the unity. And it's like, he does it this and he does that. Well, okay, well, whatever. But it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. We are going through a period now, first of all, of dramatic consciousness transformation, but at the same time, we are going through a period of enormous challenge when this control system, which has been building to this time for not just decades, not just centuries, but thousands of years and some, is now seeking to enslave not just the bodies, but the thoughts, the emotions, every level of the human psyche in total servitude, to microchip people, microchip our children and grandchildren, so that they will not even be in control of their own thoughts. We're moving, and it's in their own documents, to a time, and it's being seen now as the social services take more and more ridiculous reasons to take children away. We're moving to a time when the state will take children from their parents at will, and they're moving to a point where the state will bring them up. we are being faced with a bombardment of chemical and electrochemical attacks on the body. We have chemtrails going across the sky day after day after day. And you are bothered about my hand? You are bothered about some reading of the themes in my book? I'm not saying you, I mean people that do that. I mean, you know, we're so here. Instead, and not sitting on forums just communicating with each other, but getting our arses off the seat, going out there where you have to get your hands dirty, where you have to take the challenges, where you have to take the abuse, and making a difference in the world instead of skitting all the time and contributing nothing. Because I say to these people, the time is coming when you are going to have to justify, not only to the children and grandchildren, but to yourselves, that you had some idea, not least because of the efforts of others and not yourselves, you have some idea of what we're going into and what we're facing in this world, and your response to it was just to skit and undermine and try to undermine people who are trying to do something about it. And if we get pulled into these irrelevance. I mean, it's just another version of religion. Oh, I follow Islam, and boo, box. I follow Christian, box. I follow Judaism, box. And these things, oh, is it the sort of box? We have to start coming together and looking at the big picture. In short, we have to grow up as a human race, individually and collectively, and move into adulthood. Because it's the childlike, sheep-like, divide and rule mentality down these irrelevant fault lines, and these are irrelevant fault lines too, that has allowed the tiny few to divide and rule the many. And we are in a time now, as people wake up, where the few are going to lose that grasp, that grip, that control of the human collective psyche. But we're not going to do it with this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just my view. And I am...
Thank you, David.
At peace with it.
That's good. Okay, you mentioned at the start there these beings that spoke to you through the psyche.
Right.
And you described them in your book a couple of times as they.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea who or what they are?
Well, I haven't got a clue. The way that I perceive them is not as beings, but as consciousness, awareness. But to be honest, I'm following the journey, Theo, and I'm following the clues, and that's good enough for me. Because when, like all of us, we leave the lens, the body computer, as I call it, these things will be answered. Oh, it was you then. And I've not really spent much time thinking about the form that this takes. I just follow the guidance and the synchronicity and the language of life, which I've kind of learned to read as a result of 20 years of experience. And as long as it feels good to me, intuitively good, this is the right thing to do, then that's what I do. So the detailed nature, mate, I don't know. And funnily enough, I don't think about it much.
Okay. I was quite interested in the book to read that you sort of looked at the evidence for life after death.
Right.
And a lot of people have written about that, and I've had guests on the sofa talking about that subject. And one of the things that you pick up on, which I don't think many people have particularly picked up on, or very occasionally, is that even though those contacts with those people who have died, or are in the other plane or whatever, are quite common and seem to be pretty credible, they don't often say anything very interesting. And you pick up on that, don't you? And I was very interested in that, because I think you're saying in your book that they're still kind of under the thumb of whatever these, you know, these lizards are, if you like, that they're still not into consciousness and the infinite consciousness. They're still kind of waiting to come back as a human being. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, you know, I think if I just set out how I see it, and it's how I see it after 20 years of research and what have you, and how other people see it, it's entirely up to them. I'm not trying to convince anybody. I never have. Because I'd just be another guy standing up saying, I've got all the answers, you must believe me. So how have we moved on? This is information, make of it what you will. And I'm quite at peace without ever people, you know, decide to reject it or whatever. The way I see it is the real heart, the real core of existence is, and I've experienced it as stillness and silence. I call it the still, silent, infinite, all possibility. And within that silence, within that stillness, you have all potential, all possibility. And it's within that level of awareness that everything and nothing, everywhere and nowhere exists. Because when you're dealing with all possibility, you are in a state where there are no paradoxes. There cannot be paradoxes when you're in a realm where everything is possible. This is why everywhere and nowhere, everything and nothing is possible there. Now, what then happens is there are realities created out of that all possibility, which are some possibilities, one possibility, some possibilities. For instance, people think that when they think of silence or when they hear silence, that they're hearing nothing. You say to people, what can you hear? And they go, nothing. In fact, within that silence is everything. And it's when you introduce sound that you pull out of all possibility, the silence, individual possibilities. And these manifest as what we call worlds, realities. And therefore, when you are experiencing these worlds, unless you hold the connection to that infinite self, that infinite level of awareness or possibility, what I call the infinite, then your focus of attention can be pulled into the experiential level of the world that you are in or experiencing. At which point, you basically operate on a fraction of your infinite multidimensional self. And one of the biggest foundation, the foundation of the global conspiracy is to pull people in to a fake self-identity called David Icke or Ethel Jones or Charlie Smith, so that people self-identify overwhelmingly, sometimes totally, with that level of awareness. And therefore, your attention is pulled into a state of limitation, of I have no power, of Joe Public, of I can't. And once we're in that place, that state, because we're not getting inspiration and insight from higher levels of our consciousness anymore, because we've kind of shut it off, then we look, if you like, into this world for a fix on who we are, what the world is, and what's going on. And of course, who gives us that information? The education system, cabal controlled. The mainstream media, cabal controlled. And peer pressure, where people repeat to you what they've been told by the system is who they are and where they are. And so we have this view of everything that is incredibly limited. Now, what I'm saying is that it's not just a case of people in embodiment like we are apparently in embodiment. I think it's more complicated than that, or actually more simple
David,
than that.
I'm going to have to stop you there for a moment. We're going to go for a break now.
We're having a break, are we?
If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for David Icke, why not do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE, and then your text. See you back here soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest tonight, David Icke. Okay, David, so if you want to just carry on where you
just
left off then.
Just taking this on briefly. So it's not just like there's this reality and then there's infinite, all all possibility that I was talking about, there are other levels of reality too. And when our consciousness leaves the body or withdraws from this reality, it's still affected by its vibrational state, and it won't necessarily go to that point of infinite state of infinite consciousness and awareness of itself. And so there are other realms, and in between that, and I kind of saw this when I was researching one of my books, and at that time there was this psychic show on the British cable television show every night for about an hour, and I watched this, and I've seen some others too in America, and these guys are definitely getting something, because the accuracy that they were describing events with was remarkable. But it wasn't, hey, it's all an illusion, you're being manipulated. It was, things like, he says, look after the cat, you go for that job, it'll be good for you. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but, and it was kind of accurate when you see the stories that the people in the audience told, which sort of kind of backed it up. But it was very kind of this world stuff. And so it's pretty clear watching that consciousness doesn't necessarily gravitate to, infinite in awareness of itself possibility when it leaves the body. There are many other levels of awareness which are there to gravitate to. Not all of them enlightened, as we would call enlightened anyway.
Okay, well, in the book you say that it's obvious, or you believe it's obvious, that there are other life forms in the universe, other beings presumably on other planets. And yet you describe a hell, if you like, for us. I mean, why do you think it is? I mean, are they going through the thing that we're going through, or why is it just us that seems to have this, reptilian, these beings who are out to suck us dry?
I'm not sure we are. I mean, I think that this kind of theme can be quite wide. I mean, we're aware of this. I mean, and so therefore we kind of think it's only us. Well, why does it have to be? I mean, these kind of entities, these predator entities, as I call them, could be all over the place. But I'm not primarily talking about extraterrestrials in our physical form, although absolutely they exist. I'm talking about a predator race that operates just outside of our ability to perceive them, just outside of the human body's ability to decode that frequency. And so they're just outside of what we are able to perceive, and they possess certain bloodlines within our reality, within what you might call visible light, the electromagnetic spectrum, whatever you want to call it. And this is the significance of the Illuminati bloodlines, because very early on in my journey, I mean, almost within days, certainly within weeks of meeting that psychic and being told I was going to go on this journey and do all this, and at that time it seemed crazy.
And write lots of books, she also said.
Say again?
She said,
and write lots of books. I would write lots of books, and I'm thinking, write lots of books about this subject, I don't know anything about it. But very early on, like within weeks at the very least, the area of the world we call Sumer, now Iraq, Babylon, started coming in all the time, under different names, Chaldea or whatever, Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers. And it was then leading me to this whole Sumerian tablet stuff, where they talk about the Anunnaki, who kind of bred with humans. And then you look in the Bible, and in Genesis, and it talks about the sons of God, actually the sons of the gods, in truth, that interbred with the daughters of men. And then you start to find that this is a theme all over the ancient world. Like in the Zulu area, they talk about the Chitahuri, the children of the serpent, children of the python. And then
in Southern Africa.
In Southern Africa, yeah. And then you look at other forms of religious belief around the world, and serpent worship comes up all over the place. It's the oldest known form so far discovered of human religious worship. It goes back in South Africa, in the Kalahari Desert, with the Bushmen, the Sand People as they're called, 70,000 years they've taken it back through artifacts, etc., etc. And there was a man called the Reverend John Bathurst Dean, who wrote a book called Worship of the Serpent in 1933, in which he looked at serpent worship all over the world and concluded at the end that it was by far the most prevalent form of worship all over the world. And this interbreeding that all these ancient accounts and legends talk about in their various forms created hybrid bloodlines. And so I started to understand as the years passed that this control system, this global control system, is actually the fiefdom, at least within this reality, of a network of interbreeding families that go under different names, and some of them change their names with the passage of history, but it's the bloodline, not the name, that's most important. So the question obviously was, and then you look at the royal families where they, and the aristocracy of the world, where they interbreed with each other, and it's like, oh no, you mustn't have children with the populace, you must have children with this person with a title and all that stuff. And so the question starts to come, why? What is the obsession with genetics these people have? And then you connect it to the interbreeding. What is it about that genetics? And this is why the period, which is still continuing, of understanding at least the themes of the nature of reality is so important, because you start to realize what genetics really is, what everything we're looking at here is, what this body is. It's at its core, what this whole reality is. At its core, it is a vibrational field. It's a waveform construct that I call the metaphysical universe. Whenever I say that term, metaphysical universe, I'm talking about the information waveform vibrational construct of this reality. And therefore, when we look at genetics, we see it in physical form, because this is just a holographic, illusory physical reality that we're experiencing, which is why quantum physicists have had this bewildered kind of apparent paradox between the fact that atoms that are supposed to make that up are empty, and yet they make up a solid world. Well, the answer to that is it's not solid. What happens is, through the body computers, we are decoding this waveform information encoded in the metaphysical universe, and we're encoding it through the five senses, from the vibrational into the electrical, into the digital, and into the holographic. So what we call genetics, that you can see, touch, and taste, is actually the holographic decoded projection of the vibrational information. And this starts to explain this apparently strange phenomenon that quantum physicists have found, and that's that a particle and a waveform can be in existence at the same time. That something can take a waveform and a particle form at the same time. And it's like, how do they do that? Simple, I would say simple anyway. When you are creating a hologram, one of the holograms you buy in the shops, what they do is they imprint a vibrational information construct on the print through using lasers, etc., which pass across the photographed object and hit a photographic print, which when you see it looks a bit like a fingerprint. That's not an accident either. And so on the photographic print of a hologram, you've got waveform. Then you fire the laser at it, and out of that comes the apparently three-dimensional holographic form. Now look what I'm doing with my arthritic hand, doing a Masonic handshake. Look what I'm doing. The information construct on the photographic print and the holographic projection exist at the same time. The particle, the waveform. Where I'm going through all this is why the book's quite long, is because you have to connect these dots to make the apparently bizarre seem in the credibility that it has when you connect enough dots. So coming back to this whole thing about genetics and the hybrids, etc., what you're looking at with genetics is actually the holographic projection of waveform vibrational information. And that means if you can infuse your genetics into this hybrid race, these Illuminati bloodlines, it means that they are vibrating in compatibility with your energy field far more powerfully than the general population, which allows you to, quote, possess their mental and emotional, what passes for their emotional faculties, and dictate their behavior. And that's what the hybrid bloodlines are for. One of the things that the ways that I explain the analogy of this is that, you know, when scientists are working in a laboratory with something that they can't touch because it's too dangerous, what they do is they put that material in a tank, and they stand outside of the tank and put those gloves on, and though they're outside the tank, they can work with the material inside the tank. Those gloves are the Illuminati bloodlines, basically. They allow these entities operating just outside of this vibrational reality to manipulate within this vibrational reality. So these Illuminati bloodlines are merely the conduit, in effect almost an empty shell in so many ways, to allow this reality to be manipulated, and in a very powerful way, Theo, for this reason. If we were being manipulated and dictated to by entities that didn't look human, we'd know where we were.
We'd know who the enemy was, wouldn't we?
We'd know where we were. The fact that it's done through interbreeding hybrid bloodlines that look human means that who's going to suss it? And not only that, if they do suss it, who's going to have the round ones to go out in the public arena and start talking about reptilian entities controlling the world? I mean, what are people going to do? Certainly initially, he's mad, see? He's mad. I told you he's mad. Look, Corby's taking his reptilians now. God knows what they're saying about the moon, but it doesn't matter.
Well, we'll get to
because
that later.
I am, see, this is a very important point in terms of the way I operate. I am interested in what is going on in the world. I'm not interested in winning a popularity contest. I'm not interested in everybody saying, oh, how clever he is, and oh, he's got a great mind. I'm not interested in that. I mean, call me what you like. I'm interested in what's going on in the world, and I'll pursue the information and the direction that I am guided into, no matter what people think of me. And only that way, Theo, is information going to get into the public arena for people not to believe, you must believe it, but to have access to it, to be able to consider it, to be able to look at the possibility, to see if it stands up when you put the dots together and a lot of detailed information. Because otherwise, no one's going to hear it, because people either would not pursue it, or they're terrified of talking in public about it because they fear what other people think. I couldn't give a damn what other people think. They have every right to think what they like. I have every right to do what I believe is right. And this is, I think, when you look at it, one of the so big, major, fundamental reasons why we have been kept as a human race for eons in this tiny, tiny box of possibility when we look at the world and ourselves. It's because it's a very simple process. It goes in two phases. First of all, you have to control the population's perception of the possible. That is really, really powerful, that is, because if you can suppress what is possible in people's minds, that will then limit, by definition, their sense of possibility. So if you're operating out of here in your manipulation of the human race, population's sense of possibility is here, well, who's going to do anything about that? And anyone comes out and says, they're doing this, this goes, you're mad, that's not possible. No, it's not possible for you, it's not possible for the human race in the public arena anyway, it's possible for them. So controlling people's perception of the possible and limiting it is absolutely crucial to holding this house of cards, because that's what it is, a house of cards together.
Okay. Well.
The other thing is, just very quickly, the second part of this is that you make it unpleasant, even terrifying, for people to start talking and promoting information and possibility that is outside the box. And this is where the human race is desperately responsible for its own plight, because you're talking, I think, after 20 years of looking at this, but, you know, I'm open to all possibility in the light of information. I think, you know, there's 4 to 5% of the human population are these hybrid bloodlines, and most of that 4 to 5% are not fully aware, and sometimes not even at all aware of what they're part of and how they're being used. So they cannot control the human population by numbers. They have to get the human population to control itself. And the way they do this is by setting the norms in society. You can look back all the way through history. They set the norms in society. For instance, at one point, Theo, the norm was the Earth was flat. And anyone that said it was a sphere, or actually it went round the sun and the sun didn't go around us and all that stuff, was immediately not just abused and ridiculed, their lives were taken. And today we have a situation where the sheep have the human sheep have out-sheep the real sheep, because at least the real sheep need a sheepdog to frighten them into line. We do it to each other. When you step out of these norms and you start to express yourself and your view and information that's outside this limited possibility, everyone knows that, mate, that's not possible, all that stuff, who is jumping on you? Well, not Barack Obama or George Bush, but the rest of the population, your family, the people at work, the people down the bar. The fear of what other people think and the limitation of human possibility, those two things alone, mate, are devastating for human control.
But you say that there are 4 to 5% of people who are the Illuminati bloodlines. But if we say the population is 7 billion, which you do in this book,
right,
that's 280 million people who are that's just 4%. It's 280 million. That's a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, but we're talking, like I said earlier, the vast majority of those people are being used in terms of the manipulation of their faculties, their perceptions. But the ones in full, absolute 100% awareness of what they're doing and in full support of it is a fraction of the 4 to 5%. You're looking at really in full awareness. You're looking at a tiny number, really. These researchers talk about 13 Illuminati bloodlines, 13 Illuminati families, and all that goes out from that. But you're not talking fantastic amounts of people. And one of the reasons is researchers all over the world have talked about that part of the agenda is to cull the human population, because they are frightened of the numbers. They cannot control us unless we, A, control each other, and B, acquiesce to what the control system imposes upon us. And people do that all the time. You know, we've reached a point where when, for instance, we are getting these ludicrous, outrageous impositions on the fine detail of our lives, like wheelie bins have to be out at not before then and not after that, or it's 200 quid fine and this far from the curb and all the rest of it. What is happening is the same as manipulating the behavior of a laboratory rat, where they put them in these mazes, and if they go down certain channels, they get an electric shock. And they might go down it once, they'll go down it twice, and they might go down it 3 times maybe. But after that, you can take the shock technology away, that rat will not go down there anymore. Its behavior has been changed. And when you look at what's happening here with the traffic cameras and the surveillance cameras and all the stuff that goes on now, we've reached the point where it's not good enough anymore, frankly, for people to look at it and say, well, I don't know, what's the world coming to? Big brothers everywhere. And then the next question will be, what's on the telly tonight, honey? Don't complain about the imposition of a big brother state if all you're doing is moaning about it. Because I'll tell you what's happening. They are imposing more and more outrageous laws, more and more fine detail of our lives, and if there's no resistance, there's no resistance, okay, give them the next bit, boom. Oh, what's up, brothers? The big brothers everywhere. What's on the telly? No resistance, boom. And this is what's going on. And, you know, it's no good moaning about it. We have to start coming together, drop the fault lines irrelevant to race and religion and income bracket and all the rest of it, and start to stop cooperating with this system of imposition. Because if the millions and the tens of millions and the hundreds of millions will not acquiesce, the control system has no power whatsoever. Guy comes out the White House, guy comes out Downing Street, we've had a discussion, we decided this is going to happen. It only happens if the public say, well, we better, you know, I'm terrible, I don't know, but we better follow it. That's it. If the public said in large numbers, no, we're not doing that at all. Go away, go about your business, you're not needed here. It's over. But we don't. And this is why it's crucial, Theo, for the control system to absolutely divide and rule us. And the conspiracy research movement is divided and ruled. All these bloody things going, what do you say? We sort of go, well, for goodness sake, come on. You know, we're at a point now, like I say, when we need to grow up and come together, put the irrelevance aside, you know, say to ourselves, you know, if I was on my deathbed now, would what I'm getting all het up about matter? No, well, don't let it matter now. Let's come together on what affects us all, affects all our children and grandchildren, and that's fundamental, basic freedoms being eroded by the day. And that is that power is absolutely enormous. The control system would fall because it would have to fall, but it's going to fall anyway a few years along the road, because there is a consciousness awakening going on, which is a major theme of the book, and it's probably in many ways the most important thing.
Well, we'll leave that to the last section,
sure.
I think.
Okay, yeah.
I'd like to talk, but I've had people like Boom Shanker and David in Cambridge asking about the reptile people again,
right.
and exactly, perhaps I'd like to ask a question here, that in the book you describe it, and some of the illustrations describe it in a way where some of them are kind of operating through these human hybrids, and some of them are able to actually shape-shift into humans, and they are actually the aliens. Is that correct, or have I misunderstood?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, one of the big things that I've learned over the last 20 years of following this journey is there's never one answer, there's never one explanation for anything, because there's far more possibility, even within our reality, than we understand. So it can happen like this, it can happen like that. It's like invading Iraq. Yes, it was for oil, but it wasn't only for oil. And yes, it was for this, but not only for that. Yes, it was for this, not only for that. So there are multiple possibilities. And it's the same with all this whole shape-shifting stuff. There are many different explanations for it. But the key one, seems to me, is the possession part of it. That seems to be the key one. And also, these entities that are vibrating, their base vibration is outside of this reality. They can come into this reality, but they can't stay for too long, because they get a problem with their vibrational resonance compatible with the base resonance of the frequency that they're experiencing. And it was another thing that started coming into my research a long time ago, Theo, and that was blood drinking.
We're going to go for another break now. Okay. Once again, if you'd like to text in your brief questions or comments for David Icke, please do so now. See you back here very soon. Welcome back to On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers, and my special guest, David Icke. As you can tell, our live audience has woken up. We have a very small live audience of people who have worked here. They're going to wave goodbye to you all at the end, hopefully. So, David, before the break, we were talking about these, you know, these aliens, these reptiles, from another. The
serpent race, as the ancients used to call them.
And they're from some kind of parallel vibration, so they're very close to us.
Right, very close to us, yeah.
But they know we're here, and we generally don't know they're there.
Yeah. And
they can either control people who are close to their vibration because they've deliberately interbred with humans.
Genetics, yeah. And actually, something that's happened only in the last week, a story that was in all the newspapers about this guy, Craig Venter.
Oh, yes, he's created an artificial organism.
Created an artificial cell, in effect.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me, because it relates to this very strongly, what's interesting to me is, you know, I've been talking to you for years about the fact that the body's a biological computer. And I was fascinated to see when Craig Venter was explaining what he did, he was using computer terms all the time. And what he was saying was that once you've got the cell, if you can, these were his words, if you can put in different software, if you can rewrite the software in effect, the cell then just goes on following the program of the software. So, you know, when we are talking about interbreeding between species, it doesn't necessarily have to be done through sexual procreation. There are many genetic things that can be done, including that, because this is an important thing to stress. I kind of hinted at it earlier. These entities are very, very much, to say the least, ahead of us, in the public arena anyway, technologically in their understanding of this reality. So what they are capable of is far greater than what humans are capable of. And if we, like I say, and it's so important why I stress it, if we perceive what is possible by what is possible in our reality and our limitation of potential, then we're never going to get what they're actually doing. When we get to the moon, that's even more important. But the thing about the blood is very, very important too, or very much part of this. See, what has happened in my life over the last 20 years is themes have come in. And when you go, so I mean, I've been to over 50 countries now researching this. And when you keep going around the world and you keep coming up with the same thing, there's a reason for it. And one of the common themes with these Illuminati bloodlines, when you follow and research them through, is pedophilia comes up all the time, and Satanism, blood-drinking human sacrifice ceremonies. And these two are fundamentally connected. And the blood drinking is to allow them to stay in this reality for longer than they normally would. Why? Because they have a hybrid genetic code. They have a hybrid DNA, if you like. And they can open the human codes and stay in this reality for longer, despite the vibrational incompatibility, by drinking human blood, which carries the human genetic, therefore vibrational code. This is why they drink it so much, as a matter of course. And they're also hiring you can connect with and what are sharing the same space now in the two on different vibrational wavelengths. So for entities to feed off human energy, which they do, it's a massively common they produce this energy. So if you look at the way that human society is structured, it is actually structured to produce that energy. And so when you have like a war, a world war, think of the energy that's being generated within that frequency range at a time of massive conflict, fear, and all the rest of it. And that's in part, not the only reason, but that is in part why society is structured as it is. And then we come to the pedophilia part of this, because when something keeps happening and keeps coming up, the question needs to be asked, why? What is it about these people that they want to have sex with children? And as I've moved along the journey and followed the dots and followed the clues, what they're doing, pedophiles, is acting as a conduit between the child predator serpent energy field, and through the pedophile, in the course of having sex with children, the possessing entity is drawing that energy out. The ancients talked about this. And so when you see this ancient theme of sacrifice of young virgins to the gods, young virgins was code for children. And they are vampiring off that energy field, because it seems very, very strongly that they want the energy of children before puberty, because at puberty there is a chemical change, quite obviously a chemical hormonal change at puberty, that's what it is, that changes the energy field and makes it less, if you like, desirable for them. It's less than the pure essence that they're looking for. And so they possess these pedophile entities. The possession triggers the lust for children, and then in the act of the horrific act of sex with children, they're drawing off that energy. And so you get pedophilia and Satanism, human sacrifice, blood drinking ceremonies, animal sacrifice, etc., in a fantastically greater ratio among the upper echelons of society than you do in the general population. Because in the end, we see the physical. They're always looking at the energetic. And it's all energy in the end, and the manipulation of energy, and the vampiring and absorption of energy. And we are now beginning to see that expression of what appears just to be physical things in a physical act.
You mentioned in your book sacrifice of the firstborn. Want to explain that a bit?
Well, that's a kind of another whole big area, but it seems to be very much a part of these Illuminati bloodlines, certainly some expressions of them, and some of the rituals that they get involved in. And it's in one way, it is the initiates proving that their allegiance is to the cult rather than anything else.
I wouldn't name any names here, but it occurred to me there are people, quite famous people, who've lost their firstborn child.
Yes, and that might be part of it, and it might not be. You know, it's not either or, black and white. It's always a shade of grey. It's getting the shade of grey right. But it is a part of this whole ritual cult mentality to make sure that the person is willing to do anything that the cult, the control system at that level, says they must do. And sacrificing your firstborn is, well, if you'll do that, you'll do anything. And this is something that we need to keep in our minds when we're looking at politicians and other people who appear to be there to serve the public interest, but are there as conduits, as front men and women, to serve the control system cabal's interest. And without any question at all, very significant numbers of people in those positions, particularly the major positions, are actually involved in human sacrifice rituals and pedophilia. And so their allegiance is not even close to being to the people. And I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, Theo, all over the world, who've told me the same story of being abused in these rituals, of seeing other children and animals sacrificed by some real famous people that appear on CNN and all the rest of it. I came out, for instance, in 1998 in a book called The Biggest Secret, and I named Ted Heath, the Prime Minister of Britain from 1970 to 74, who actually signed us into what is now the European Union. This man was extraordinary in the scale of human sacrifice and murder and torture that he got into. And he was Prime Minister of this country. And a journalist called him when the first edition of the book came out, 1998, and read the passage to him. I never heard a word. If he wanted to go to court, which he would, well, of course, have to do publicly, he could have stopped that book, but he didn't. Why? Because it's true. Because I talked to people who'd seen some of the things that he did. And I've had other people come to me since and say, I couldn't believe it when you mentioned Ted Heath. This is my experience of him. Now, but he's only one example.
But we have to be careful if we use names.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
people who aren't deceased, I know he's deceased.
Ted Heath has now left us for goodness knows where, and I wish him well wherever he is, because vibrationally I wouldn't fancy it myself. But he is just one example. And I've talked to people who've been inside these cults, inside these satanic rings, who keep naming the same names. And people would be shocked if they heard some of them. And like I say, not everyone in the upper echelons of political, business, banking, media, society is like that. Nothing like everyone. But significant numbers are, in much greater ratio than in the general population. You know, when Satanists have come out, like David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer in New York, who was jailed for the murders as if he did it alone. Well, in prison, he actually wrote to a Christian minister. They interchanged communications, and he explained that actually it was the satanic cult in that area of New York that was doing it, and he was just the front man for it. And he said in some of his letters, you know, people think basically that Satanists are like the lowlife of society. That's how they perceive them. No, he said, they're the doctors. They're the people that run society. They're the pillars of society. And
well, there's that confession at the end of your book, isn't there?
Sure, yeah.
Which is pretty shocking stuff.
That's very interesting, yeah. In the early part of...
I don't mean it's your confession, is it?
No, in the early part of 2010, a document came to light in Australia which was purported to be, I call it the Confessions of a Satanist, just to give it a title that people can understand what I'm talking about. But it wasn't really a confession, was it, when you read it? It was more just explaining the power that the satanic network has over the world. And as I've said in the book, I can't verify its authenticity. What I can say after 2 decades of researching this is it's absolutely brilliantly accurate in how the Satanists work. And he talks in that document about how politicians are introduced to paedophilia, and how it's our little secret, and how when the children are abused by the politicians, our little secret, and how when the children are abused by the politicians, the children are then used in satanic ritual so they can't tell. You see, another extraordinarily powerful way that this has been kept under wraps is that what's happening in the world is so fantastically different to what people are told and believe is happening in the world that they can't, often though it's changing, bridge that enormous gap between the way they perceive the world to be. Why? Because that's how they're told it is, and how it really is. Which is when people like me come in here and say, this is what's happening, they go, you're crazy, you're mad, you're mentally ill. But someone's got to say this. Otherwise, this never gets exposed. And this goes on. Children go on being tortured. They go on being sexually abused. They go on being killed. Just look in the face. I did this once, Theo, you know. When I started to understand what was going on, I was in a movie theater in America, and I'd just begun to understand it. I'd just seen the scale and the depth of it. And I got out of my chair at the end of the movie, and I turned around, and I started walking up the stairs to the exit, and a father steps in front of me out of another kind of row. And as he walked in front of me, he had his child, his little boy, on his shoulder, looking over at me. Mm-hmm. And I looked in that little boy's face, and I cried my freaking heart out. Because kids like that, on an enormous, fantastic scale, are being abused, are being tortured, and are being sacrificed, while people on bloody Twitter go, did you see, some television, grow up, people. This is what's happening in the world, and we need to face it, because if we don't, and people don't have the guts to come out and not only face it, but communicate it, like Robert Greene over there, with Holly Gregg, fantastic, and Anne Gregg, they don't have the guts to do that. Well, while this is going, oh, what's on television tonight, honey? This is what's happening to these kids. And so this is why I, and others, I'm not alone, this is why I focus on this stuff, and what people make of it is up to them. But I ain't going to shut up about it, and I ain't going to shut up whatever anyone does, whether it's the authorities or not. I mean, watch me. As long as my mouth moves and these things keep vibrating, I ain't shutting up about this. Okay. Whatever they try to do to shut me up, as they're trying to shut Robert Greene up and Anne Gregg up and all the rest of it. Okay. We have to keep going with this and look in those children's faces and say, not doing this, not exposing this, is simply not an option, so how are we going to do it?
Okay, I've got a question here, which I think is quite a good question. I don't know who it's from. It says, hello David, why can't we counter these different vibrations with technology? Surely these frequencies can be disrupted. Or maybe we could see them with some device.
Well, this is a really interesting area, because it kind of brings us to the whole thing about the moon that I'm talking about.
Let's talk about.
I mean, there's such a lot of information to dot connect, which is why the book's so substantial, before the apparently bizarre starts to make any kind of sense. What happened? This is relevant to why we can't see some of these things, and why we can't see, I would suggest, a great deal that is actually around us, because we're switched off from it. I went through the same sequence that I've gone through so often when I was writing this book. I sat in my chair, I was going to start writing that day, and the atmosphere in the room changed. I thought, here we go. And then I got this just clear as day thought come into my mind: the moon's not real. The moon's not like you think it is. The moon's not real. I'll explain more in a second. But so, because I'm used to this, I didn't just dismiss it. I thought, okay, and I just put a few key words into a search engine along this line, actually not expecting to find anything. And immediately up came a book called Who Built the Moon? Yeah. And I thought, Who Built the Moon? What a title, when what's just happened to me. It came out a few years ago, not many years ago, but a few years ago. I'd never heard of it, actually, but I got it and read it, and I thought it was excellent. I do recommend it, where they're looking at the anomalies about the moon, and not only the anomalies, which are very strange and unexplainable unless the moon is not a natural heavenly body, shall we say, and also the incredible synchronicity of geometry and mathematics, etc., between the moon, the earth, and the sun. Anyway, it's like everything. You know, we're coming back to this chasm thing, Theo, that I talked about. When we're born into the world, we understandably accept what it's like when we arrive. this is one of the dangers of children now being born into a world of great surveillance in their schools, in their lives, because, well, this is how it is, you know. You know, we still, in our generations, have the ability to look how it was to how it is, and we can say, hey, this is not right. But if you're born into this, and this is what generations are now, then suddenly it's, well, this is how it is, isn't it? You know, this is the world. We are really the last generations that have had the ability to see that difference. And it's the same principle with the moon, because you look at the moon, it comes up all your life, and there it goes. But when you start asking questions about it, I did once this theme started, it's like, I didn't know that.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. This book, by the way, this is the book here, in case you haven't seen what it looks like.
It is amazing because according to what some scientists have said, is that, first of all, it shouldn't be there. I mean, one guy said the only thing you can say about the moon is it's observational error, because it shouldn't be there. And another was pointing out that the Earth's gravitational field, etc., wouldn't definitely have a satellite at all. And if it did, it would be tiny. One postulated maybe 30 miles across.
Like Phobos or Deimos for Mars.
Yeah. That bugger is 2,160 miles in diameter. Look at it. Why is it there? How is it there? And anyway, I then came across this very substantial article by these two Soviet scientists from the Soviet Academy of Sciences in the 70s, where they actually said that the moon is a hollowed-out planetoid.
Because it's very undense, isn't it?
Undense, yeah. It's a hollowed-out planetoid by a very, again, highly advanced technological race. Could we do that? No. Could they do that? Yes. This is the mind-opening.
High gravity, and then you go along a bit, and it's low gravity. So there's things.
I mean, there's so many things, Theo, as you know, and so many things to connect to support this. But one of the key things that I came across was the suggestion, and some scientists have said this from the evidence, that the moon is actually hollow, or at least partly hollow. And so I was putting all this together, and then I read or rang the oracle, Credo Mutwa, the official historian of the Zulu nation. And I found the Zulu, I mean, the ancient legends, if you take them symbolically rather than literally, are incredibly accurate. There's some very literal stuff there too. But I found the Zulu legends to be especially accurate if you read them right. So I rang him. I didn't tell him any of the stuff about the moon that I was coming across, and the moon's not what it seems to be. And I just said to him, can you tell me any Zulu legends about the moon? Oh yes, he said, and off he goes. He said, we say the moon is an egg. Now, some anthropologists say the moon's an egg, primitive people. Why does it say the moon's an egg? Symbolism. They say that the moon is an egg because it was hollowed out and rolled across the heavens to the earth, quote, hundreds of generations ago, led by two brothers, Wawani and Umpanku, who had scaly skin like a fish, quote, and that they were known as the Water Brothers. Now, of course, this is South Africa, this is Zulu land. But you go then to Suma, and you've got the Anunnaki, the two brothers, Enlil and Enki, in their culture. And at least Enki was very much associated with water, and they were symbolized in many ways as fish gods. So what you find is, although they use different names, the same thing keeps coming up. And they say, this is very significant too, that when the moon came, it caused catastrophe on Earth. And of course, look at the moon. Never mind what I'm going to talk about in a minute, what time, the moon matrix, which I see is manipulating human perception. But just the physical fact it's there, it fundamentally affects the tides, it affects the angle that the Earth is at, it affects the spin, therefore it creates the seasons.
David,
it fundamentally affects our hormonal...
We're going to go for another break
Oh, we're going to open the door now and get some air conditioning on in the break.
To David Icke, please
I like
do
the break.
so now. With the word Edge and in your text. See you very soon. Welcome back to my special guest, David Icke, and me on the edge. I got that wrong, didn't I?
I think I'm the one on the edge, mate.
Yeah, well, there you go.
We're all on the edge.
We're all on the edge, aren't we? Last show. Emotional moment. Anyway, the moon. Let's talk about the moon.
Yes, I was saying before the break, and the break was lovely because they opened the door and put the air conditioning on. It's fantastic. Can we have another one? But, so I was saying before the break that just by the moon being there, it has fundamental effects. It affects time because of the spin of the Earth and all that stuff. It affects time, month. We have the menstrual cycle, the moonstrual cycle, etc., and the hormonal balance of the body and situation of the body is affected by the moon, including the endocrine system, which connects into the vortex chakra system and takes us out into the multidimensional self, including the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, which make up the third eye, the ability to see beyond and perceive beyond the five senses. All these things are fundamentally affected by the moon. And when you think that the foundation of the conspiracy, as I've said earlier today, is to disconnect us from higher levels of awareness, other multidimensional levels of self, and hold us in the five senses, because then they gotcha. Because you're operating on such a limited perception of self in the world and possibility. But I've gone further in the book than just the moon is there and it has these fundamental effects on the Earth. And I've said that we are, in effect, being subjected to what I call the moon matrix. And just to explain some background here, what I'm saying is that the black holes, they've said there's a black hole at the center of this galaxy. It seems to be that there's a suggestion that they have black holes at the center of every galaxy. And what I'm saying is that the black holes vibrate a frequency, the base frequency of this reality. And that frequency, depending on what it is, triggers the suns to elicit and project photon information, photon encoded information, which we then decode into this reality. That's basically the waveform vibrational level, the metaphysical universe, is manifests itself in the form of these photons, which are information. And then through the vibrational, the five senses, through the electrical, through the digital, into the holographic, we manifest that information here. It's, in effect, exactly the same principle, Theo, as the wireless internet, whereby if I had a computer now, it would have no wires connecting it to anything, but if there's wireless internet in this studio, that computer would pull out of the unseen, purely information, a whole collective global reality that we call the World Wide Web. And if I went on it here, or in South Africa, or America, or Australia, it would be the same collective reality. That is the reality that we are decoding from this photon information. And of course, through the meridian lines of the body is photon energy. What's going through the meridian lines, the ley lines of the Earth grid? Photon energy. It's information. So, and this base vibration coming out of the black holes is not static. It goes through a cycle. It goes through a cycle, and then it comes back to the start, basically. And as it goes through the cycle, it's changing the information that is being elicited by the suns in the form of photons, and therefore changing the information we're decoding. And it's this process that takes us through the epochs of what the Indian culture calls yugas, and the Mayans talked about the cyclical nature of time, where we go through different periods of experience. There are times like what they call the golden age of great expansion and openness and connection, and there's other times when it's much more suppressed and limited. And these are different opportunities for infinite awareness to experience different situations. And what I'm saying is that the moon, as in effect, hacked in, excuse me, to that structure that I've talked about. And
so let me just get this straight. Are you saying then that whatever the sun is sending to us is good for us? And whatever the moon is doing to that message from the sun, via the black holes, if you like, is kind of blocking it, like a muffler or something on a car or something?
In the simplest terms, absolutely right. And we've got an analogy on Earth, China. the Chinese people cannot access vast tracts of the worldwide collective reality that the rest of great chunks of the internet from their computer system. What I'm saying, Theo, is out of the moon, bless you, out of the moon is coming a frequency which has hacked in to this sun photon reality information construct, which is stopping us seeing great chunks of reality that we could see, and is also feeding us a collective mind, like a hive mind, which is stimulating us to feel anxiety and fear and all the rest of it, to keep us in servitude, and therefore to produce the energy that comes from that. And you know, in the 1990s, see, we've got enough time.
We've got loads of time.
Oh, that's great, yeah. Especially for me, you know, Viva Diarrhea, here he goes. I saw a movie, I think it came out in 1988, but I saw it in the 90s, called They Live. You've seen that, haven't you? And I could see that it was accurate at the time in its themes, but since I've begun to understand about this moon matrix, absolutely, it is far beyond accurate compared with what I thought it was before. Very quickly, but you can go on YouTube and get it. Just put in John Carpenter, They Live, and you'll get it in chunks. John Carpenter is the man who not just directed it and produced it, he really wrote the music, he did everything. And John Carpenter, when you follow his movie-making history, knows a great amount of what's going on. He's worked with a massive insider called George Lucas on the Star Wars movies, etc. That's not happening in a galaxy far, far away. Come on, George, please. It's happening much closer to home. Anyway, this They Live goes like this. It's set in America sometime in the future. The future from when it came out in 1988 is about now. There's a massive economic collapse going on, and it's a police state. The hero, I'll call him the builder, the hero character arrives right at the start of the film. He's walking from city to city, town to town, trying to get work in the building trade. He manages to get a short-term job at the start of the movie, and at the end of this first day, a big black guy who's on the building site says, "Have you got anywhere to stay?" No, he says, "Well, you wanted to, share what we have." What we have was a tent city, tent village, and corrugated iron cobbled together shelters, because this economic collapse in America in the movie had people living on wasteland in these tent cities and villages all over the city. Go to America, it's happening now.
Yeah, I've been to Detroit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's happening.
Yeah.
And what happened then is this builder, who's now in the tent village, he starts to see that some strange things going on at a church across the road, and he goes and has a snoop around when from outside there's a service going on and there's church music playing, and he goes in, he looks around, and he realizes that actually there's a group of people from the village are in there, and the service is a tape. It's playing a tape. It's just a fake. And someone had rigged up a television in this wasteland village, and the main American mainstream channel kept being broken into by this man's face saying, "They're here," words to this effect. "They're here, they're controlling us," etc. And then it would cut back to the program. Anyway, that night there's a police state raid on this village, and they bring in the bulldozers and they raise it and everyone's scattered. Guy comes back next day, the builder, when it's all settled down. He goes in the church, snooping around again, and he finds these cardboard boxes. He grabs one, he runs into the alleyway down the back because he's frightened of anyone seeing him, and he opens it up, and inside is just sunglasses, loads of sunglasses in this box, which, I mean, he's bewildered, he's disappointed. Sunglasses, what's all this about? So he takes one, puts it in his pocket, throws the rest away, and then walks into the main street of this city. And everything looks normal. There's advertisements, people, cars, everything's going on, and he just puts the glasses on. Now the world is shockingly different. Through these glasses, all the drink Coca-Cola and vacation in Jamaica, now all he can see is words like stay asleep, obey authority, don't question, all these subliminals. He then goes to a newsstand and he picks up the equivalent of Time and Newsweek, and when he looks with his naked eye, it's text and colours and graphics and pictures just like now. Puts the glasses on, all he can see are these subliminals: obey authority, stay asleep, don't question. He looks at a dollar bill, and instead of seeing a dollar bill and all that's on it, all he sees is words, "This is your God." Next thing that happens, a guy walks in to buy a paper. To the naked eye, he's a human. He puts the glasses on, this guy ain't human. And it goes on, and he starts to realize, nothing like the majority, but a significant number of people are not human, but they appear human to the naked eye. Where I'm going with this is where it led to. They realized that from the top of the television tower, a massive dish was broadcasting a signal that was stopping the people in that city from seeing what he could see through his glasses. And they were unable to decode that, and therefore saw something that wouldn't make them question and see what was going on. What I'm saying in the book is, if you take that dish on the top of the television tower to be the moon, that is what it's doing. And it seems to me, and the research has gone on since, that there's a modus operandi here, whereby what they do is they bring these moons in, when the moon, to a target planet, when the moon comes in, it has a fundamental effect on the target planet, and it basically brings an end to the society that's there then. Then it settles down.
Which would be in the Golden Age, would it?
Yeah, yeah.
The mythological Golden Age.
And what do they say, Theo? It came to an end in great catastrophes and the earth turning over and all the rest of it. Now that's what would happen when they bring the moon in. Now, what they then do, and I think this is a modus operandi, going back to an earlier question, they've repeated in many parts of this reality, whereby when things settle down, they then start changing the nature of the genetics so that it tunes into their collective mind being broadcast from these moons. And I say very strongly that one of the most fundamental parts of the brain, called the reptilian brain, what scientists call the R complex, which is so fundamental to human behavior and human society, what I do in the book is, not time now, but I look at the character traits of the reptilian brain and the way it functions according to mainstream science, and then I look at society from that perspective. You know, we live in a reptilian brain society to a very large extent. It's about reaction, it's about fear of not surviving and all the rest of it. Anyway, I'm saying that that reptilian brain at least is nothing like it was before. And that's the microchip that locks us into the moon matrix.
We've got about 2 minutes left to talk about, you know, the hopeful stuff.
Sure.
So if you want to talk about a bit of hopeful stuff, because so far that other stuff is pretty depressing.
Yeah. Well, I'm just answering your questions, aren't I? But yeah. let me say this. Despite what I've said, I'm the most optimistic man you'll ever meet. Why? Because 20 years ago, one of the first things I came across after I met that psychic, and a constant theme, was of a vibrational change that was coming, that was going to wake humanity up from its coma, its sleeping beauty state.
So give people the sunglasses.
Yeah, and the other theme was that this energetic change was going to bring to the surface all that had been hidden from humanity. And there was no sign of either at the time. But the theme was so powerful that I called this new energetic change the truth vibrations. In fact, my first book I ever wrote after my awakening, mind explosion, was called Truth Vibrations, after this energetic change. That's 20 years ago, right at the start. And as these 20 years have passed, I have seen the truth vibrations demonstrably, more and more with every passing year, awaken more and more and more people to a much more expanded perception of self in the world. It's happening, and it's happening faster and faster on an exponential curve. And then you look at what we knew, Theo, about what was going on in the world, the manipulation, all the background. What did we know 20 years ago? What do we know now? What do we know more every hour, every day, every week? That's all that's remained hidden will be brought to the surface. That's what I was told 20 years ago, and it's happening. And what I suggest is happening, I mean, people have to just feel what they think about it, is that what we're going through is, I talk there about this vibrational base construct, which is coming out of the black holes, that is now very powerfully in the process of changing its vibrational state. We're in this cusp between how it was, the suppressed, the limited era, which in astrology comes down to a kind of a Saturn period, and I think that's very significant. Saturn's very much involved in this, and this epoch we're coming out of. Saturn, yeah, and we're going to find out why Saturn has so many moons as we go along. Anyway, and that's for another day. So as this energy changes, it's triggering different photon information from the suns, in this case our sun, and so people are starting to, those more open to it first, are starting to decode a different base information construct. And what that's doing is changing their perception as we decode it and move into a different era. If you put information on a software disk, it will manifest that on the screen. If you change the information on the software disk, there's no way it's going to manifest the same stuff on the screen. You've just changed the basic information construct of which that screen is a projection. So what's on the screen must change. And what we're doing is we're going through this period now of fantastic energetic change, and we're moving more and more into a new epoch of expansion, of harmony, of love, of understanding, of awareness, all the things that people call utopia. We're moving into it. And this is why I say in the book, and I've been saying it for years too, to be fair, is that it's no coincidence that it's at this time, of all times, that the control system is throwing the kitchen sink, the plug, and everything at us. It wants microchips at birth. It's getting chemical infestation and chemical imbalancing of the body through the infestation of chemicals in food, the electromagnetic microwave soup that it's creating all around us, that is affecting us electrochemically, and if it imbalances that, it imbalances us vibrationally. How they are wishing more and more control, more and more suppression, more and more surveillance. The surveillance stuff is not for the general population. It's for those people waking up who can see it, who want to do something about it. And they're throwing this stuff at us now, genetically modified food. What is that designed to do? Genetically modify us. And what the whole kind of totality of that is, it's trying to batten down the hatches against this vibrational change, to stop it affecting humanity in terms of Sleeping Beauty gets kissed, in a way that will most powerfully awaken humanity to a new perception of self and the world, which will bring the control system down, because that ignorance of all those things is what holds it together. We're standing there holding the house of cards together. Once we suss that's what's going on, and we start to realize who we really are, not Joe Public, not David Icke, not Ethel Jones, infinite consciousness, having an experience as David Icke and Ethel Jones, etc., suddenly the power dynamics move. And they're desperately terrified of that happening. Well, I'm sorry, guys, this is the situation I would suggest. The energetic information epoch on which the control system has been developed and founded, and of course we're seeing it now because it's so desperate to batten down the hatches, it's had to break the surface and become more obvious, but it's been controlling us subliminally all along, and it wanted to keep that. It wanted to keep that subliminal control. No one's questioning it, no one's challenging it. Oh, piece of cake this is. Now, because people are waking up, they could see down the timeline and they knew this was coming, they have timed this control system barrage to try to keep the lid on this. They can't. They can't. We are now at a cusp, and therefore there's lots of this, because this is now fading out, but it's still there and trying to hang on. This is coming in more and more with every day and every hour, which is going to transform this reality from a prison to a paradise, and we are going to see this control system coming down You know, people talk about 2012. Again, 2012 kind of comes into this in the sense that they talk about an epoch change. I think 2012 is much overrated. I think its greatest importance is it's not 2011. But 2013 is more important than 2012 because this energetic change is gathering pace and impact all the time. And
are you saying that
I say by 2016-17, mate, this control system's coming down. We're going to start to see a completely different world because we will be manifesting and decoding into reality a completely different world. The control system doomed.
You're saying this is the end game and we need to be awake enough to take advantage of the good stuff that's happening.
Yeah, the thing is...
to overthrow the tyranny, if you like. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Well, no, I use this analogy all the time. We're at a fork in the road. And people can choose to stay in this epoch, which is a dying epoch. Its energetic construct is being dismantled. And like I say, when that ceases to be, its holographic expression ceases to be. You know, you take the control system off the software disk, it ain't on the screen anymore. And this vibrational change is what's doing it. These people are desperate. You know, they're walking around, oh, we're in control, and it's just a done deal. You know, whistling in the dark, darling. Wishful thinking. But we can play a part to make this change easier and less traumatic if we get off our backsides, we disconnect them from the sofa and start to express ourselves and become expressions of this energetic change within holographic reality. And the more people that do that, the more resistance there is to the control system, the less extreme it's going to be by the time it comes down. If we don't do that, then it's coming down, but it's going to go further along the road. And the next few years, it's going to seem as if the control system ain't coming down. And then suddenly, bang, it's going to collapse because its energetic foundation is over. It's an epoch change. And these guys better get used to it. You know, think they're in control. You must be joking.
So, you know, the final message is, well, apart from read the book, but be aware, be awake, start waking up.
The thing is, we need to be streetwise, because when we're streetwise, we're much more effective. So the stuff about how the control system works, how they manipulate us, the nature of reality and how they manipulate that is essential to become streetwise. We become much more effective when we're aware of that than when we're in ignorance of it. But that streetwise level has to be expressed. It doesn't have to be. You know, this is infinite possibility. Do what you bloody like. But to stop the control system going to levels that we don't have to let it go, then we need to get involved at this point.
David, we're going to have to stop there. That's all we've got time for. Thank you to everyone for watching our special 2-hour show and for those who texted. And thanks to my very special guest, David Icke. The Edge Media forum page for this show is at edgemediatv.com, where you can post comments or questions, or go to my guest's website at davidicke.com. Who knows whether we'll be back with an exciting show that might even change your life. But if we do, please don't miss it. We're going to finish with many of the people who work so hard here and friends of the family applauding you, our audience. We love you all. Until then next week or whenever, remember this. They're watching you, watching us, watching them. Cheerio. Come on, everybody. Thank you, David.
Cheers. Thanks, darling. Nice to meet you. Thank you, mate. Cheers. Sorry about your car. That was a sneeze. There you go. Cheers, mate. Cheers, mate.
Are we still on?
Yeah, I think so. Because they come in and they grab your hand. You know, people who know me, they don't. They don't even shake my hand, or they might go, hello. And so what I tend to do, sometimes when someone comes at me with one of them, is I grab their hand.
Yeah.
I grab their hand so they can't squeeze mine. But apart from that, I mean, it's all kind of garbage. But believe it if you wish, because I couldn't care less.
Okay. All right. I'll give you one more. Like
oh,
that.
one more.
One more. Like that.
Issue. Sorry.
This is from somebody called Dallo. I have a question that seems unimportant, but it keeps coming back. Much as I admire David and the work he has done, as someone who has often been ridiculed and dismissed because of his Wogan comment years ago, which I totally understand was edited and received completely out of context, why does he present himself in such an otherworldly, almost messianic way on his DVDs and books? Is it just slightly unfortunate quirk of Neil Haig's art, and not exactly images a wide audience readership can easily relate to?
Well, don't relate to it then. That's it. Don't relate to it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You know, I tell you what, this is an important point. You know, we disappear up our backsides, human beings, so profoundly. We are so obsessed with the twigs. Never mind the trees. We're so obsessed with the twigs, we can't see the forest. Therefore, in other words, we were so obsessed with the bits, we can't see the unity. And it's like, he does it this and he does that. Well, okay, well, whatever. But it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. We are going through a period now, first of all, of dramatic consciousness transformation, but at the same time, we are going through a period of enormous challenge when this control system, which has been building to this time for not just decades, not just centuries, but thousands of years and some, is now seeking to enslave not just the bodies, but the thoughts, the emotions, every level of the human psyche in total servitude, to microchip people, microchip our children and grandchildren, so that they will not even be in control of their own thoughts. We're moving, and it's in their own documents, to a time, and it's being seen now as the social services take more and more ridiculous reasons to take children away. We're moving to a time when the state will take children from their parents at will, and they're moving to a point where the state will bring them up. We are being faced with a bombardment of chemical and electrochemical attacks on the body. We have chemtrails going across the sky day after day after day. And you are bothered about my hand? You are bothered about... And those few words, Theo, absolutely encompass the way I've lived my life since 1990. The way the sequence goes, and you quite rightly say in the introduction, it's been layered, because if you're hit with anything like the big picture in one go, I mean, your brain goes, excuse me, can't compute, I'm going to get my turquoise shell suit on. Right? Which is what happened to me at that yes, time 20 years ago. I was hit by so much information. It was like pressing too many keys on the computer, it froze. But what's happened is it's gone in layers. The first few years were about the way that a network of families, interbreeding families, control the banking system, engineer wars, use techniques that I've talked about, like problem, reaction, solution, create the problem, then offer the solution, and the totalitarian tiptoe where you're going from A to Z, but you don't tell people that, but you go in little steps, each one projected as unconnected to all the others.
Like the EU, for instance.
Yeah, so you go down the road to where you're going, and always were going, but the people don't realize that's where you're going because you're taking them there in steps. Bigger steps you can get away with, but not big enough for people to go, hold on a second, what's going on, because the change is so great. So that was all the whole first few years, and then it started going into this whole reptilian area, then it went into the nature of reality, by far the most important, because without understanding at least the themes of this reality, what it interact with it, we can't understand the conspiracy, for a simple reason, that the center of this cabal of manipulation, they know how reality works, and they keep it systematically from us by religion and by mainstream science, which is held in what I call a song sheet mindset, where it keeps research, scientific research and awareness in such a narrow band, but it never gets out to see what reality is. And if you know how reality works, and how people interact with it, and how people affect it and are affected by it, and you keep that from the population, you are, although you're a few, in an enormous position of power. And then it's moved on now in this book into the whole thing about the moon that I'm talking about. And the process has gone with each of these layers, each of these stages, in precisely the way that was told to me 20 years ago. What kind of happens is I'll get an insight, like from out of nowhere, that something is how it is. And then from that moment on, increasingly, very, very quickly after that, information comes into my life in terms of documents, books, people I meet, my own experience, all related to that particular subject. And I've started to learn now and understand that when that starts to happen, I'm thinking, okay, I was naked on the front, and as someone said, it was much ado about nothing, you know. But yeah, I mean, we've got these full body scanners now, you know,
at the airport,
showing
yes.
people naked at the airport. And I said at Brixton, they want to see my body, serves them right, mate. You know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. So that's great that it's got to 20 years, and it's going to get to a lot more. You
describe the journey in this book. I mean, it's an incredibly dense read. It's nearly 700 pages altogether, isn't it? I have actually read every word, and a lot of it is where you got to where you are now, which is in itself an incredible journey, and how you've built layer upon layer of learning and knowledge of what's going on experientially and through, you know, research over those 20 years.
Yeah, you know, it was kind of funny when I was writing it 20 years after I consciously started the journey, and I remembered lots of things that I'd forgotten, really. And key to everything that I've done in the last 2 decades, right up to now, was something that I was told in 1990. I went to see a psychic because no other reason than for a year I'd felt like there was a presence in the room when I was in a room alone. I wasn't alone. And this got more and more powerful, more and more tangible, to the point where, long story short, I went to see a psychic. Didn't tell her what was going on. I said I wanted hands-on healing for my arthritis, which was true, but the real reason I went was, will she pick it up? Mm-hmm. And a series of things started happening on the third visit to her. Well, when I am in a point in my life where I'm presenting the sport, and I'm national spokesman for the Green Party.
You're presenting Grandstand, weren't you?
Yeah,
BBC television.
Yeah, and then I'm lying on this bench, having the hands-on healing, and suddenly she said, my God, this is powerful, I've got to close my eyes for this one. And of course, I'm all new to this at the time, and I'm thinking, you know, what the heck's going on? And then she started giving me these messages from these figures she was seeing in her psyche, that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets, and basically everything that was said that day in 1990 has happened or is happening. And the reason I mention that is because there was one specific, quote, message that has really been the foundation of everything I've done. And it was, he will say things and wonder where they came from. They will be our words. And sometimes we will put knowledge into his mind. Sometimes he will be led to knowledge. There was another one later connected to that, which said, no need for arduous searching. It was all arranged, in effect, a long time ago. All you need to do is follow the clues.
Welcome to tonight's On the Edge with me, Theo Chalmers. Tonight's show is 2 hours long and live, so if you have any questions for my guest during the show, text them to 87778 with the word EDGE, a space, and then your name, location, and your message, and we'll try to pick up at any that really hit the mark. They're all charged at standard rate, so why not get ready to text? Tonight's show marks something of a milestone here at Edge Media, Controversial TV. It will be my 74th show since I started presenting it on October the 2nd, 2008. But sadly, and much more importantly, it will also be the last ever live show broadcast on this channel. Unless, that is, those who are working hard to save it really can. In any event, it should be running repeats of existing catalogue until the end of June, and then watch this space or check out edgemediatv.com. Having given you that sad news, I'm delighted that tonight we are going out on a major high. I'll be talking with a man who has for 20 years now bared his soul and everything else in his search for who he truly is and what his place is in our, or as, the infinite consciousness. On his journey, he has also discovered that our world and the humans in it, namely you and me, are in the very gravest danger, a danger which is now apparently coming to its final apocalyptic stages at the end of thousands of years of planning and deception. A danger so terrible that many recoil even from hearing about it, or close their minds to it, or even accuse my guest of being totally insane so that they do not have to consider the awful possibility that perhaps what he says in his many books is true, as though that could stop him. He has just sold out the first of 2 8-hour shows at Brixton Academy, and his new book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More, has just been released. And what a read it is. If you haven't guessed yet who my guest is tonight, he is the fearless, the insightful, the visionary, the extraordinary spirit of the age, David Icke. What a show we've got tonight! David,
I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, Theo.
Was that a bit of a build-up?
Oh, it was, yeah. It's because the you know, showing more than you know, kind of you said, was on the front of that book, I Am Me, I Am Free.
Yes.
And there's a whole new area opening up here, and the areas are getting closer and closer together because we are expanding in our ability to process this information. Therefore, we can receive it in greater abundance quicker than before.
Okay. I think what we need to do is get a couple of issues out of the way at the start of the show.
Issues?
Well, issues...
I have issues.
Well, they're not your issues.
Oh, they're your issues.
Well,
anybody got a handkerchief?
These are... I had people text me some questions before the show,
right.
And a few people mentioned this accusation that you've given people a Masonic handshake. Now, I think it's important to get it out of the way. And this is someone called Dead People Stuff, who's a member of our forum, and he says, what about those Camelot handshakes? You know, so that people want to know about this. I've seen that fake photograph on your website of you being a Mason in the pinny and everything, and about 4 foot tall.
Don't I wear it well?
But I think it's important to just, you know, get that out of the way if we can at the start here.
Well,
I've got one more.
You say it's important, but when something is total garbage, and so obviously so, I wonder if it is important to get it out of the way. First of all, I couldn't give a damn what people say about me in any way, shape or form.
Okay.
It doesn't go in one ear and out the other. It doesn't touch the sides. I've had 20 years of it. I've been ridiculed by the best mate.
Well, I appreciate
the thing is about some of the things that are said about me, and other researchers too, is it's like they're trying to bring you down for no other, or trying to undermine you for no other reason than to undermine you. And you know, I've seen that I make signs with my Masonic signs with my hands when I'm talking. That's another one from basically the same source. Well, just let me show you this. That is my hand. It's riddled with rheumatoid arthritis, and my fingers are apart like that because they won't, unless I pull them together, and it's not very pleasant, go together. And so, as I said in an interview the other day, this is clearly a massive exposure of me, because what's being exposed here, it's very little known. It's the arthritic hand Masonic handshake. Apparently it goes back to Babylon. Apparently. And the other thing that, I mean, you've got to laugh, haven't you? I mean, you know, I mean, if they had a brain cell, it would die of loneliness. But another thing that I do is, you know this thing, Theo, when they say, people have this thing about firm handshake, sign of sincerity, right? Well, they have that thought a few seconds before they're peeling me off the flipping ceiling.